After exploring the Italian countryside and the Iberian Peninsula in the gaming world, it is time for us to move north to one of the older nations in Europe, to the beautiful country of France. The hexagon is home to philosophers and inventors, artists and artisans, and many big game developers like Ubisoft, Arkane Studios and Quantic Dream. France is a vast nation that extends from the Channel to the Côte d'Azur, and many are the games set here. In today's video, I will try to list them all, explaining how developers decided to depict the various areas in the European giant. As usual, I will bring the games that are set in a specific part of the country, trying to avoid the ones that depicted too vaguely. In the first and bigger half of the video, we will travel all around France, listing all games set in the various provinces of the nation, and in the second part I'll briefly mention games where France is a playable nation. While I'm not French myself, I'm still looking forward to seeing what games are set in the other sides of the Alps. But enough with the introductions, let us begin this Tour de France. Starting touring the country from south to north, how could we not start our journey in the beautiful city of Nice, depicted in Forza Horizon 2. The gem of the southern region of France, lying over the Mediterranean Sea, is one of the most beautiful places we can freely roam in the gaming world. In Forza Horizon 2, the player has a vast selection of vehicles to roam and race across town, from the St. Nikolai's Cathedral to Garibaldi Square, an impeccable depiction, the best one in fact to kick off this video. Oh, but while Forza Horizon 2 is the most modern game set in Nice, it is not the first title set here. That honor would go to Driver 3. The other title has let's say a rough depiction of the city, but nonetheless, Driver 3 also decided Nice to be the ideal city to set a game in. While Nice is a nice place to drive around in, it is not a proper racetrack. There are no real-life races happening along its promenade. However, 20 kilometers away, another city in the Mediterranean Sea does host a Formula 1 Grand Prix, in fact one of the most prestigious ones. I'm of course talking about Monaco. The independent principality hosts one of the most peculiar races of the calendar, where drivers race the fastest cars in the world in narrow streets possible, making every turn a challenge. All Formula 1 games and many other racing titles lets players faithfully experience one of the most challenging races, depicted splendidly in later entries of the series. But if you want to race in a proper racetrack in Provence, then look no further. The circuit of Paul Richard near Le Castellet has hosted many French Grand Prix in recent times, and it can be found in various racing games. Now, it is not one of the most beloved circuits in the calendar, but it is nonetheless a proper racetrack, one that is vividly colorful and challenging to drive around. But don't get the wrong idea, the southern region of France is not just about racing, but has a long history that saw conflicts and battles taking place here. Battlefield 5, set during the Second World War, has one of its multiplayer maps located here, currently named Provence, that depicts a town located in the region. While it is not a recreation of a specific battle, the Allies did fight in the area in the codenamed Operation Dragoon, while liberating southern France from the German occupation. One of the cities the Allies liberated was Marseille, third biggest city in France, capital of the Provence-Alpes Côte d'Azur. Here we find two video games depicting the metropolis, The Bourne Conspiracy and Paris-Marseille Racing. The former title is an action-adventure game based off the movie of the same name, while the latter is a low-budget racing game based on a French TV show. The quality of both titles is not so high, but they do share the fact that they are all set in Marseille. And speaking of racing, how could I not mention the famous Corsica rally event, Tour de Corse, an event that takes place all around the French island of Corsica, depicted and of course playable in WRC 8 and V-Rally 2. Rallying is always a nice way to explore lengthy parts of the countryside around the world, in our case the island of Corsica in the Mediterranean Sea. One of these two games is more modern than the other one, but I bet that both were praised for including this iconic track. Moving back to the mainland and into the mountains, we found various titles set in the Alpine region of France. In the mountain peaks there is Ubisoft Steep, a sport game that lets you ski and snowboard all across the French Alps. In the game, the player can travel all across the Aiguilles and Aravines mountain ranges, reaching the tallest mountain of Europe herself, the famous Mont Blanc, peak that sets the border between France and Italy and not too far from Switzerland. Speaking of Mont Blanc, the town of Chamonix is perhaps the best known in the area, and luckily for us we can race across and around it in the Gran Turismo franchise. The snowy track inherently has a challenge like no other, being slippery and rich with elevation changes. I'm not too big of a GT fan, but from what I can see the track was featured in multiple titles, so I must assume it is a fan favorite. Still up in the French Alps, the famous Chateau d'Ouen is depicted in the futuristic manner in Overwatch 2, where it is renamed to Chateau Gilliard. The Blizzard game is known to set its very smaller but very dense multiplayer maps in real-life locations, and it is fortunate that the developers chose this splendid castle as their inspiration for the game. Moving west, we found the historical region of Aquitaine, known mainly for its importance during the Middle Ages and the 100 Years' Wars fought against the English. While I'm not personally a big fan of A Plague Tale Innocence, as I made clear in other videos of mine, I do give praise to the developers when it comes to depict the French region. The game is not set in a precise location, but the game takes huge inspiration from Bordeaux and its surroundings, immersing the player in the medieval kingdom of France. But if you are seeking a more modern and artistic depiction of the area, look no further than the Focus Entertainment published title Dordogne, set in the department of the same name. To say this game is visually beautiful is to say the least. I mean, just look at the gameplay in the background. The art direction is very inspired, gentle, simple, yet expressive. The game heavily emphasizes the connection the protagonist Mimi has with the French countryside, being the region an integral part of her story. La Rochelle is the first coastal city in this list no longer facing the Mediterranean Sea, but the Bay of Biscay. Commandos 2 Men of Courage sets one of its campaign missions there, where you have to guide French resistant fighters infiltrate a German military outpost. The graphical quality of the game might not age too well, yet its gameplay is as strong as ever. There have been countless warriors and generals in French history, one of the most legendary ones being Joan of Arc, who fought against the English in her city of Orleans. Orléans. In the 2006 PSP game, developed by none other than Level 5, the developers crafted a Fire Emblem-like adventure where fantasy elements mix up with the real story of Jeanne d'Arc, giving an anime spin to the legendary tale. The game takes place in Orléans and across all of France. Very near that city, we found the other circuit that hosted Formula 1 races in the past, the famous Magny-Cours, home to the French Grand Prix between 1991 and 2007, with some older racing games having it as an available racetrack. While again not the most iconic racetrack in the history of Formula 1, the track does resonate more than the modern Paul Ricard, and many are the fans who wish for Magny-Cours to make a comeback, myself included. But I know what you're all thinking, Central France has another more important circuit to mention in the video, one that is the protagonist of the Endurance Championship. I'm of course talking about Le Mans. The historic circuit of Le Mans is home to the 24-hour race of the same name, and it can be found in various titles such as Project Cars. The racetrack is one of the hardest for drivers to complete, yet alone to win, but its victory is an achievement and a half in the racing world. Moving forward, the city of Mayenne, also found in the Pays de la Loire region of France, was selected as home for one of the missions of Call of Duty 3, where once again the American protagonist is tasked to defeat the occupying forces. I don't believe the city was remade accurately since we're talking about a PlayStation 2 game, but it nevertheless counts for this quite extensive list of all games set in France. And actually, perhaps it is better to quickly mention that there are tons of games set during the Normandy landings, better known as D-Day. I really cannot list them all for how many there are, but I'll bring to the table two classics, the second Call of Duty and Medal of Honor Frontline. I have the feeling these two games started the theme of setting first missions of World War II campaigns in one of the 5 beaches the Allies assaulted during D-Day, and it is more than fair to pay them homage. In addition to the landing, Call of Duty World War II and Battlefield 1942 do have multiplayer maps set in a specific place in Normandy, Saint-Marie-du-Mont for the former and Caen for the latter, two of the various cities the Allies captured during the war. As per usual, the multiplayer maps are designed with gameplay in mind first and details second. The last Second World War game that I need to mention set in Normandy is Sniper Elite 5, not much for its campaign that is set in very generic maps like its predecessor, but for its mission that is set in Mont Saint-Michel. The iconic landmark is too unique not to mention, the castle city that when the tide is high becomes an island. The depiction crafted in the game is truly outstanding, and it is very beautiful both to observe and to play in. And Sniper Elite is not the only game to depict the unique Normand castle. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood did a small map dedicated to Mont Saint-Michel, in the odd but still somewhat enjoyable multiplayer mode the game had. The map did come as a later addition, so I'm not sure how popular it was despite depicting the beautiful fortress. The very last game set in Normandy I'll mention in this video is The Cursed Crusaders, a game set during the 4th Crusade. In the game there is a mission set during the siege of Chateau Galliard in Eure, where knights and archers fight to take over and win the battle. The game is quite obscure, but it still looks fun. Moving from Normandy to Haute-France, we still find yet again some games set during the Second World War. More specifically, there is Battlefield 5, which has a multiplayer map heavily inspired by the city of Arras, and Commandos, that has a campaign map set in Compiègne. The former title is quite recent and it gives quite a vibrant color to the prairies around Arras, while the latter game uses a more grey-toned color scheme. I also read that Eternal Darkness is partially set in this region, in the city of Amiens, but I'm not too sure if that's the case. Please let me know down in the comments below. However, I can confirm that there is a Battlefield 1 map set in Amiens, named the same way. The level of detail in this one is higher than other examples brought in the video, so I'm glad that we have at least one game confirmed to be set here. And perhaps this is a good transition to talk about the First World War, another global conflict that was fought on French soil, more specifically in the Grand Est region of France. Battlefield 1 has two more maps here, one in Soissons and the other one in Saint-Épied-Tours, and the game Verdun has of course Verdun and other battles across the border. Valiant Hearts is the only non-FPS that I have on my list set during the war, more specifically in the city of Reims where lethal gas was used. This title is special because, as the name suggests, it tells a tale of ordinary people involved and hurt by the war, of victims of one of the greatest human atrocities that was the Great War. Truly a touching tale, one that I have discussed more in depth in one of my previous videos. And at last, moving to Ile-de-France herself, we find Assassin's Creed Unity, being set in two different cities, Versailles and Saint-Denis. Both are recreated quite accurately by Ubisoft, and it is always a joy to explore real-life locations when they are so faithfully recreated, especially if historically, since the game is set in the late 1700s. What better cities to conclude this quite extensive list? If you made it this far, I wanted to thank you... Wait, hold on a minute. Am I not going to talk about the French city everyone is thinking about? Is it even possible to write about 2000 words of a script of a video titled All Video Games Set in France without mentioning Paris even once? My first video of my current format was literally talking about Paris depicted in Unity. Okay, hear me out. There are a ton of video games set in Paris, and I mean a ton. Perhaps even more than the ones I've listed so far. Every time you search top 10 video games set in France, or if you're searching in French, top 10 jeux vidéo déroulant en France, or whatever, at least more than half would be games set in Paris, and I felt like I had to give the spotlight to other lovely parts of the country rather than to list every game set in the capital. So let's make a deal. I'll just mention some games set in Paris and what makes them unique before going to the last segment of this video. Valiant Hearts and 1111 Memories Retold have a very unique art depiction of the city. Assassin's Creed Unity, The Saboteur and Bioshock Infinite Burial at Sea depicts Paris in the past, Remember Me and Overwatch 2 depict Paris from the future, and Mario Kart 8 lets you race across and below the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe. There are many other titles set in Paris, but these are my highlights. Before jumping to the conclusion, as stated in the introduction, I'll share a list of strategy games where France is a playable nation, ideally protagonists of whatever game is in. There are many, but I'll promise I'll make this quick. Being one of the oldest nations of Europe and being at the epicenter of many great conflicts, France is often a playable nation in various strategy games set in Europe. Even if there are games that take place before the formation of the modern French state, there are various strategy titles that let you play with the kingdoms and tribes that inhabited the region. In fact, I think it would be fun to list the games in chronological order. Starting with the ancient times, Total War Rome 2 lets players play with two factions located in France, Massilia, a Greek colony in the south, and the Arverni, a Celtic tribe from the central region. In the expansion Caesar in Gaul, the players are able to play in a much denser map of France by playing as either the Roman invaders or the Celtic and Germanic tribes that live in the region. Strategy games set in the early Middle Ages that have various French kingdoms and playable nations are Total War Medieval 2 and Crusader Kings 3. Both titles offer players the possibility to play with either the Frankish Empire or the various independent duchies around France such as Burgundy, Normandy and Brittany. These games make it quite exciting to unify France as one kingdom. For the late Middle Ages, we have of course Europa Universalis 4, where France is a powerhouse in Europe and a colonizer abroad in the newly discovered America. The game of trying to keep the balance of power in Europe is on, and it is the player's task to expand their horizon without angering all nations in the neighborhood. One of the most exciting times in French history is of course the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars, recently explored in the appropriately named Total War Napoleon. Needless to say that the whole focus of the game is either to conquer the world impersonating Napoleon, or to contain and defeat the French Empire by controlling the English, Austrian or Prussian armies. It is perhaps the best strategy game where France is truly the protagonist of history. For the Victorian Age, there are various titles, from the well-known Victoria 3 to Colonial Conquest to Variant Maneuver. Even if France is no longer the dominant force it was under Napoleon, the French Republic is still a superpower, ready to fight for herself in an ever-expanding and changing world. And at last, for games set during the World Wars, how could I not cite Hearts of Iron 4? The title is the second World War game for excellence, and France is of course a playable major nation. The DLC La Résistance expands upon the French resistance movements that fought during the German occupation, a crucial role for when it came to liberating France later in the war. For games that are not set in a specific age, we must mention Age of Empires and the Civilization franchises, wherein both a France-based faction is playable and often well developed. This is of course a selection of games where France herself is playable, and if you are a strategy game enjoyer, let me know what other games you would recommend. So there you have them, all games set in France, or at least the ones I was able to find. To make this video I've done extensive research, not only to find as many games as possible, but also to filter out games that weren't quite set in a defined region of France. Just like in the Italian video, I did find some websites like Sense Critique that offered me some help, but these lists were less handy than you may imagine. Still, I'm quite happy to have finally done another one of this type of videos, especially because for once on YouTube, this list does not include only games set in Paris. It was getting out of hand and I had to do something about it. If you made it this far, I wanted to thank you one too many French times for watching today's video. Slowly but surely I'm filling up the amount of countries I have explored in video games, so now it is up to you to decide what other country or group of countries I should do next. Please choose a smaller nation this time. I wish you a wonderful day, and until next time, arrivederci.